Welcome to Seminar Sunday, District 21's weekly webinar series. It's great to have you on the line this evening. This is called part 2, but really it's a third part in a seminar series on pathways this far. It's something that we know is new and fresh, and therefore there's certainly lots of questions out there regarding the Pathways learning experience and how you can navigate it and use it in your day-to-day Toastmasters life. In the first presentation of this series, we talked a lot about just the high-level basics of the education program. The second presentation, which was last week, focused more on the path options that are available to you. There's 10 different paths currently. I'll get into those again in just a moment. We'll do a really brief recap on everything. And then today what we're going to touch on very high level is the Basecamp Manager piece, as well as a little bit on how to get your Distinguished Toastmaster, and lots of time for question and answers. We want to make sure you've got the support and resources you need to be successful. As mentioned at the start, this is weekly, each and every Sunday, with the exception of 2 weeks at the end of December. Coming up next week is effective emails, and then we'll be getting into a couple of weeks worth of business, so to speak. We've got our district budget question and answers will be presented the following week. The week after that, we'll hold the District Executive Committee meeting, which is the core district leadership team, the area and division directors, and finally the district council meeting. So that should be really exciting. I'm looking now at the chat here, and I do look at it through the seminars as well, I'd like to emphasize. So please feel free to pop your questions into the chat, or there's also a question submission method that you can use usually at the top of your screen there. And throughout the session, I'll just kind of pause and dive over to the chat and navigate whatever the questions happen to be. So don't be shy to put your questions in there. That's what this is all about. I want to make sure it's a two-way street. You don't want to hear me ramble on for a straight hour. So let's see here. So Jody, yes, I did receive your email that you hadn't had a chance to use the software, so I'm happy to run through it here. So I think we're all good with that. And if anybody has any questions, like I said, pop them into the chat or into the question feature, and we'll make sure to address those as quickly as possible. So let's start having fun here. Let's talk about pathways. I am in love with pathways, I must admit. It's been a great last week. I was lucky enough to be at the International Convention in Chicago, Illinois, and that was certainly something that was a theme everywhere there as well. And there's lots of reasons to be excited about it, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will be just as excited as I am. Our objectives this evening is, first of all, we're going to review the last 2 webinars on pathways. Again, relatively high level. We're not going to get deep in because some of you were likely on those sessions, and if you weren't, the recording is definitely available to you, and I encourage you to take a look at it. We're going to expand on the last session regarding pathways basics and path selections. We're going to do a deeper dive into resources available to us and answer your questions, plus more. So first, I've started the last 2 seminars with what is Pathways? Well, Pathways is a brand new educational program replacing the traditional Toastmasters education program that's been used for the last quite a number of years. I can't remember exactly when the traditional program was introduced in its current format, but certainly it's been some time now since we've seen some changes. And this is all about looking at the future. Manuals and those types of things are great. We all love them. We've got a special spot in our heart for any type of Toastmaster manual. But the reality is the world is moving towards more and more of a digital age, and this program is focused, of course, on the member experience. So what you'll notice is throughout this whole program, as you navigate through it, it has videos, it has quizzes, it's very interactive, which allows it to be a little more interesting rather than just reading a book. There's more engagement with you. There is some continuity in the program as well. There's, as I mentioned, 10 paths, which I'll touch on very quickly in a moment. But there's 5 levels in every single path, starting off with mastering your fundamentals and building you up to demonstrating expertise. So there's consistency there. And last week, we talked a little bit about how similar the projects were. Every level 1 is the same. Level 2 is generally the same. And then from level 3, things get really different depending on the path that you take. But the real benefit with this is it allows you to hone in on the skills that you're looking to expand on. Perhaps you join Toastmasters to just simply become a better communicator. That's all you want. You just want to be able to speak with someone, for example. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to get up and do speeches per se, but maybe that's interpersonal communication you want to focus on. And as a subset, you want to do management or you want to do public speaking. It gives you those abilities to pick instead of painting everyone with the same brush as we did with the traditional program, where no matter who you are, you were issued a competent communicator and a competent leadership manual, and you had to run with it. There was no flexibility in what options you go with. With this program, you have that flexibility. Everybody's going to do an icebreaker, their first couple speeches, and get comfortable just with the speeches. But after that, it's 4 speeches, by the way. You dive down a different path based on your individual desire or needs, depending on which way you look at it. So if you've got more questions about pathways, don't hesitate to ask them, because absolutely it's a little bit of a mystery still because it's so new. 10 learning paths, as I mentioned, here they are on the screen if you're joining us on computer. If I'm just double checking here. Okay, actually nobody this week is joining us by phone, which is interesting. Usually we have a contingent who's joined us on the phone, so that's awesome. Everybody can probably see this then if you're looking at your computer screen right now. These are the paths. I don't want to walk through them too deep at this point in time, but absolutely you've got the 10 different choices in paths, and every one of them is unique to your needs, I suspect. You will notice some themes. They are different. One of the things that Toastmasters International recognizes as a difference is strategic leadership versus management. And why I want to point that out specifically is I get a lot of questions about dynamic leadership versus leadership development. They've both got leadership in their title. Dynamic leadership is focusing on strategic leadership. Leadership development is focusing more on management. So just an FYI, if you are still in that decision-making process of which path you want, and you do want to focus on leadership, that's the difference between the two, and hopefully that helps you in your decision-making process. Another thing that I mentioned in a previous webinar, but I want to reiterate, is the fact that you get to have 2 paths for free if you were in 2 clubs at the time pathways rolled out in your specific region. So I'll use District 21 as an example, which is in Region 1. The rollout was March 20th. If on March 20th you are a member of 2 or more clubs, you can have your first path free like everyone else that either signs up for Toastmasters as a new member or was an existing member at that time. But you also get a bonus path. And why I like highlighting that is because you don't get to select it through the system. You actually have to contact the supply orders team at Toastmasters International. You can call them, you can email them, and they will certainly help you out. Just let them know you're part of 2 clubs on March 20th. And I recommend doing that sooner rather than later, just because as time goes on, I mean, you may forget, they may forget. It's really nice just to get that over with. There's no need to start it right away. Just get it loaded into the system. And you don't have to do anything other than let them know what path you want and that you're a member of 2 clubs. It'll just appear in your pathway system. And you don't need to do anything with it. You can just let it sit for days, weeks, potentially years. I've got a question here from Jim. When members complete a path, will they have to pay extra for another path? Excuse me. Yes, there is a charge for a second path, and that would include, if you want one up front or when you complete one path. I believe it is $20 or $25 US for an additional path. So first path is free for everyone, regardless what the situation is, new member, existing member. Second path is only free if you are a member of a second club on March 20th. For Region 1, if you're from outside of Region 1, you'd have to double check the rollout schedule, as that was the date that determined. It was kind of a hard and fast date based on the rollout date. And I know that's a bit of a pain for those that are used to getting something free when you complete your Competent Communicator. Just remember that this is a bit of a different program. There's 14 projects in every path, so that's a little bit more than a Competent Communicator, and giving you another path would give you the whole other 14. And it's cost a lot of money, of course, to develop this system, so they absolutely need to have a way of recovering that. So that's how they do it. And Sean's pointed out, yeah, so it's the $20 US for a path, and then $25 US if you want paper copies of that path. Just keep in mind, with paper copies, you lose some of the abilities that Pathways offer. So obviously you don't get the videos and everything. They're not, available. They're not available to you. So that's something you'll want to certainly take note of. If you are still a fan of the manuals, is that you do have some limitations as soon as you go that way. And I believe there may even be 2 paths that you can't get a paper copy of. I can't remember which one they are off the top of my head. And I believe the translated ones, other than English, there's only 2 paths you can actually get manuals for. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting. You will get the quote unquote best experience going with the online. I understand some members of your club may not be comfortable with online. Maybe even you won't be comfortable with the online to begin with, but I encourage you, give it a shot, because once you get used to the system, it's not bad. The real learning curve is just getting comfortable with that system. Once you understand how it works, it becomes a lot easier. And another thing to keep in mind is Toastmasters International is working hard to do what they can to make Pathways easier for us to use. One barrier that they do have right now, though, is the fact that the software that the Pathway system is based on is not in-house developed. So nobody at Toastmasters World Headquarters developed the software. Instead, they purchased the software from Cornerstone On Demand, and then they basically just did the slight modifications that are they're able to do in that system, and have launched that into the Pathways program. So just keep that in mind, that they are working on it. There is some limitations because it's a third-party software that they've essentially modified for our use. But once you get used to it, I've found, over time to become very comfortable with the system now. And there's still a few surprises I find, but absolutely it's not too bad once you get in there for a little while. So I also wanted to point out, and I had this exact same slide last week, but I want to reiterate, every path 5 levels, 14 projects. Level 1 is the same regardless where you go, and level 2 is similar. So it has 3 projects. One of them is always the mentoring, Introduction to Toastmasters mentoring. One of them is always understanding your leadership style or understanding your communication style. And sometimes it's both of them, which means that's the 3 projects. Other times they kind of swap them out for other relevant topics to that path. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there, regardless what path you pick. For the most part, levels 1 and 2 are going to be very similar experiences. Level 1 for sure is exactly the same. Level 3 is where it really starts to deviate and change for you. So any questions on just the overall navigation of Pathways? I'm certainly happy to answer any questions whatsoever about the general navigation or use of the system. I know pop-ups is a constant thorn in people's side. Just remember, when you go through the Toastmasters.org website and click the link to go to Pathways, it's taking you to that other website, that Cornerstone On Demand website. So if you have a pop-up blocker, for example, that doesn't restrict Toastmasters.org, you also need to make sure the other site is not restricted, or you're going to end up in kind of a loop where it's not going to work. It's going to tell you your pop-up blocker is on, and that's just because it's that the Pathways specific website that's not on your unblock list. Okay, so Leslie is asking, this question came up at our executive meeting. How are evaluations done differently using Pathways, especially the paths that are digital? First of all, thank you for that question, Leslie. That is an excellent one. So the actual method of delivering a evaluation has not changed, but a couple things have changed. Firstly, because people don't have a manual, they either need to bring the evaluation sheets, or depending on how high tech your club is, potentially someone could fill it out online. But that, once again, that's totally at the preferences of the club. Doesn't matter if you want to print it and then you can scan it later into the Pathway system. I absolutely recommend that. But you don't have to fill it out online. You can print it. You can fill it out online. There's a lot of options. I'm going to just go ahead and show you a resource that I really like here. So I'm going to share the screen. We're going to end this presentation. You should be able to see my screen right now if you're looking at your computer screen. This is the Pathways system. So the first thing you're going to notice, once again here, is the website. It's not Toastmasters.org. It's Toastmasters.csod.com. So it is cornerstoneondemand.com. It's the Toastmasters subset of that website. Very important to add that to your list of safe websites or whatever it's called in your browser. I hate to get too much into that though, because of course every browser has different requirements, but generally it's up top in your browser settings how you would disable the pop-up blocker altogether or just allow it for certain websites. Totally up to you how you want to manage that. So the evaluations, there's a number of things I want to show you here, Leslie. Firstly, if you click on evaluations, and I'll go back and show you where that was just to make sure you caught that, there's a list of all the projects. And if you click on any one of those, so let's say persuasive speaking here, it's going to allow you to launch the evaluation form. As you can see, I've now got that evaluation sheet. So if I'm the speech evaluator, I don't necessarily need the speaker to bring me their evaluation form. I could go and load this up on my computer or possibly tablet from the actual meeting and fill this out online and save it as a PDF. Of course, I know my club is not that technical, and I don't expect yours to be, but that is a possibility. On the other side of things, it's easy from this side as well to print the evaluation sheet out or read it before going to the meeting. And it basically tells you, it's got the notes here, what they're supposed to do, and your spot for notes. And the evaluation forms are also unique that I believe all of them have this, where you put people on certain skills on a scale of 1 to 5. 5, of course, being strongest, 1 being the developing. So that is a consistent experience you get through Pathways. There's a couple of things you can do once you receive your evaluation, and I'll get into that in just a moment, but I do want to go back, first of all, to Home, which is right here. So this is the home screen. Once again, you'll see once you log in, and it's just speech evaluations to your far right. That's how you access the evaluation area. If you ever want to get back to the Toastmasters site, I mentioned this in a previous webinar as well, but just to make sure everybody on the line's got that, this is where you would actually return to the Toastmasters website. Right at the bottom, there's that link. The home up here near the top is actually just the Pathways home. So that won't take you back to the Toastmasters.org website, just to let you know. So let's say, Leslie, you received an evaluation and now you want to know what's next. By clicking on your picture, it takes you to your profile, and yes, that is a scary picture of me, but that's the best I had when I updated my profile picture, so apologies if it scared you. E-portfolio here is an area I actually discovered after the last webinar. And this is a nice way to actually save all your evaluations. If you go to the Documents area, just to reiterate here, just to make sure nobody was lost, you click on your picture for your profile, then you go to ePortfolio, Documents. It actually has this, each level laid out for you, and you can just go into one. For example, here I figured this out when I did my third speech in level 1 here. And you can add a file. So you can put in, level 1's got the 4 speeches. You can put those in one by one and have them saved in a category. So that way you can go back anytime and review your evaluations. You've got proof that you did the speeches. If for some reason your VP Education was questioning it, it's really great. And the thing is, by saving it here, you never have that worry about losing any records. I have some manuals that I shouldn't be telling you this, but I probably haven't submitted the awards for yet. Not gonna lie. And these are traditional awards. It's half because I put them away right after I finished them and forgot about them. And now, here I am thinking about it, and by the end of this webinar, I'll forget again. So this is nice that you can go in and just save your evaluations there. Another common place some people save their evaluations, and how I was originally taught to do it, is, I believe, under the My Feedback here from the home page. Yes, so I actually did put my first couple of speeches there. That's fine as well. I mean, it's another method you could save things, and at least it's in the system and where to find it, but ePortfolio is certainly a better place to store your evaluations. Hopefully that helped answer that question for you. Jennifer Malazgar is asking, when I fill it out online and save it as a PDF, it does not save what I've entered. How do I stop that? That, once again, is getting down to your particular version of Adobe or the software you're using for PDF documents. But generally, when you save, what I usually do is I save as, and that should work. I would test that out first on just a random, maybe download a random evaluation form, fill it out, do a save as, close it out, reopen, and see if the text is there. Worst case scenario, what you could do is you could actually go to print, and then from print at the bottom, it would usually have the option to save as a PDF. And that I've never had an issue with on any computer I've used. So there's two kind of extra safe methods you can use, and both of those should, in theory, work. If not, let me know and I'll look into it further, but I've never had a problem doing it either as a save as or hit the print, and then instead of actually printing it, you go to save as PDF. I'm going to switch back to this PowerPoint now. Oh, Sean's got a message there. That was the problem many people have done, is to save the file which is not on your computer. So you must do a save as, then find a location on your computer. Absolutely. Yeah, you do need to save it on your computer for sure. Sometimes reopening it, even if it's saved on your computer, I know saving then can still be a problem though. So just try the save as, and if you have challenges, go back to that print method I mentioned. Not as ideal, but it certainly can work. So back into the PowerPoint here now. Basecamp Manager, I do want to talk about that a little bit here. Jim's mentioned that ePortfolio is a great feature. Due to security concerns, I would never use it. Could be hacked or something. You certainly can keep your own records. There's no restriction on that whatsoever. It is totally up to you. I think it's a convenient feature, the fact that you're able to upload them and store them in one place, and then you never lose them. If you feel comfortable keeping them though, there's absolutely no issue with that. Your VP education, especially if you're in one club, should know pretty well what you've been doing and what you haven't been doing. So I'd be very surprised if there's too many issues, unless you've got 10 different clubs and a VP education that's being extra vigilant. But that's one of the features in Basecamp, actually, segueing into Basecamp, is the ability for the VP education to see your progress. And your progress is not based on your evaluations, it's based on you working through the content in Pathways. So, for example, your icebreaker, you watch a video, and there's some other screens you go through. There's a little survey you take. Then you go do your icebreaker, and I believe you redo that survey after the icebreaker is completed. Once that is done, your VP education can see, all right, this person's already finished their icebreaker. Now they're on to project 2. So if you have some concerns, that somebody may hack in and gain access to your evaluations or anything else for that matter, definitely feel free to keep your own records. It's not a requirement that you store them there, as far as I can tell. It is a feature, though, that is available for those that choose to do that. Basecamp Manager, I unfortunately don't have access to myself, but I got some great inspiration from District 4. District 4 in the San Francisco Bay Area is a district that I have such an appreciation for. I was very lucky a number of years ago to meet their, at the time, Club Growth Director, a very forward-thinking person who's now their district director. And they've launched great resources on their site. One day our site will get up to that standard as well. I'm sure we're certainly trying to work on that, but for the moment, District 4 is definitely where it's at. If you are a club president, VP Education, or secretary, you have access to Basecamp Manager. When you go into Pathways, when you go to the from Toastmasters.org and you click on that initial go to Basecamp, it drops you onto a page where you log in as a member of your club. Below that, if you're in one of those positions, you'll see the login as a Basecamp manager. When you go in as a Basecamp manager, you will see several options. You'll see pending requests, which is, for example, path completions. So let's say I finish, or level completions rather. Let's say you saw earlier, I've completed 3 out of the 4 speeches I need in order to finish level 1. So when I do my next speech, I will let my VP Education know I've completed everything, and there should be a request in Pathways for you to approve the completion of that level, which allows me to start moving into level 2. The president, VP Education, and secretary can also see how I'm progressing and how other members are progressing. So there's some interesting analytical information they can get out of this. They can get a good sense of who's moving along, who's not, and what the probability is of certain levels being completed in the near future, or perhaps those that need to be nudged gently along. One thing I think is critical to understand about Basecamp here: if you are a VP Education and you approve a pending request in the Pathway system, that does not give them the award. You still need to go through the Toastmasters.org website and confirm that that person has achieved whatever level they have in the Pathway system. And this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The Basecamp Manager software is housed on Cornerstone On Demand, not on Toastmasters.org, so they don't necessarily communicate. There's aspects, obviously, that do, because when you log in on the Toastmasters.org website and you click on Pathways, it logs you into Pathways. But it's not necessarily a two-way street. You approve, let's just use a level 1, for example, here. In the Pathways system, Toastmasters.org website has no idea that that has happened. So it's really important that you take that 2-step approach to each transaction you're doing for a club member. You approve in the Pathway system to allow them to move on to the next path. You approve on Toastmasters.org to give them the award for the work that they've done. So definitely keep that in mind, note that down, and make sure your club officers are well aware of that, because it would be very unfortunate for one to get done and not the other. Because, of course, if the Basecamp version is done, the member never receives a recognition. And if the Toastmasters.org portion is done, the member can't move on to the next level. I am happy to answer questions about Basecamp. In the spirit of transparency, I have not, since the Pathways launch, been a VP Education president or secretary, so I don't have any firsthand experience in approving or anything along that line. But I certainly have kept on top of how things are working and have a good understanding for the workings of the system. But the resource that I'm going to send out to everyone in probably tomorrow is a excellent resource from District 4. It's a PDF explaining exactly how you do different things as a Basecamp manager, including checking progress, approving requests, etc. I really appreciated it, and I stole at least one of these pictures from them, to be quite honest. So the Pathways Distinguished Toastmaster Award. This is, I think, a pretty frequent question, because we have a lot of members right now who are looking towards achieving Distinguished Toastmaster by June 30th, 2020, which is the final day to apply for a Distinguished Toastmaster designation before the traditional program is completely phased out. So members often say, well, should I finish in the traditional program? Should I jump over to Pathways? Should I do both? That's my personal favorite. But actually, the Pathways DTM, from what I've seen, is not as challenging as some suggest. There have been some ideas that perhaps it's harder than the traditional program. There may be aspects of it, but there's also aspects that are probably easier. So let's take a look at it. Really, the fundamentals of the Pathways DTM, I put a simple slide up here because I don't want to overwhelm with it, because it's really not that bad. There's 2 paths you need to complete. So levels 1 through 5 in 2 different paths. Whatever path that is, totally up to you. And as mentioned before, that's about 28 projects. That doesn't mean 28 speeches. For example, level 1 is 3 projects, 4 speeches. So your second project in level 1 is actually 2 speeches and a speech evaluation on top of that. So just keep that in mind. 28 projects. You do have some electives in there, so it's hard to say exactly how many speeches that works out to or what time frame that turns into, because there's some projects, for example, where you create a podcast. You may or may not consider that a speech. I mean, that's some sort of presentation, but it's not a formal speech where you need 5 to 7 minutes in front of your club. Outside of 2 path completions, I think that's the 2 paths is the easy part to remember. What is more challenging is the other 4 bits. Service is one of them. And I kept it just a service because it's service to your club first and foremost. And that can be in any officer role, club president, the VP, secretary, treasurer, or sergeant at arms. And it has to be for a year. It can be 2 periods of 6 months, or it can be a straight year. But they have upped it from 6 months originally to 12 months now. So if you're in a semi-annual club, you can do 6 months now, for example, and you can go back and do your other 6 months during another term. There's also a 12-month commitment at the district level, and that is a one solid 12-month commitment. That's not able to be broken into 2 pieces. That's just 12 months, 1 year. That could be a bunch of different positions, though. I mean, a lot of people think area director. It could be area director, can be division director, could be administration, finance, or public relations manager, could be club growth director, program quality director, or district director. So there's a lot of different choices there for you, and anything that is of interest to you is certainly something worthy of noting down and considering for a future Pathways DTM. So there is those 2 aspects of service, club service and district service. Both of them, of course, very important roles. So I encourage everyone to go for that, even if you're not going for a Pathways DTM. Definitely serve your club and serve your district wherever possible. Club extension is one of the other pieces, and why I call it that is there's 2 choices. In fact, I think there's 3 choices. So you can sponsor a new club, and what that means is essentially you go and do the work to recruit the 20 members needed to start a club and get the paperwork submitted to World Headquarters. But if that's not for you, for whatever reason, let's say you don't have an idea, you're in a community where it's unlikely you can start a club, or whatever the circumstance happens to be, you can run a Speechcraft instead. And the reason I bucket that into club extension is because Speechcraft is often used to start a new club. It's either used to start a new club or to help your current club grow. So oftentimes a Speechcraft program is put on, for example, in a community center. And that program leads to the energy to create a new club. Some clubs choose to have the Speechcraft program put on their agenda, though, and that's more used to recruit members within. I did a session on Speechcraft a number of weeks ago. Highly recommend that program as well. It's a great way to get people to buy into a little piece of Toastmasters, and then while they're in, you've got a captive audience to continue trying to sell and become members. So those can be in 4, 6, or 8 week sets, or sorry, 4, 6, or 8 sessions. Doesn't have to be in weeks. You could do 2 a week if you wanted. And contact me if you have any questions whatsoever about it. I believe you can also do a youth leadership program. So that's also helping to develop future members of Toastmasters and get the parents potentially into Toastmasters. So that's club extension. There's a couple of choices there. It's not just about building a new club directly. It can be, but it can also be a couple of other things for those of you that perhaps think that the probability of a new club is low or not something you're interested in doing right now. Club retention. That's 2 things, either coaching a club or mentoring a club. Coaching is where you go into an existing club that is struggling right now and help them build up and become distinguished. Mentoring, on the other hand, is where you go into a club that's just been chartered, it's a brand new club, and you support that club in its first 6 to 12 months of existence. They don't have to get distinguished, although that would be nice if you've got the time in the year, depending when it starts, to get them distinguished. You're recognized regardless if the club becomes distinguished. It's just serving that term and obviously doing everything you can to help those members understand the program and understand how to lead their club independently. Finally, after you've done that, so you've done 2 paths, you've served your club and district, you've built a new club or Speechcraft or youth leadership, and you've either coached or mentored a club, the final thing you need to do is a DTM project. It is like a high performance leadership light for those of you familiar with the high performance leadership program in the traditional program. It is more or less where you go out, you build a team to help an organization with something. You do the speech to your club, what you're going to do, and then you report the results back to your club. So very similar concept to a high performance leadership. And that's called the DTM project, or I've also seen it called the Capstone DTM project. That's all you need to do. So totally up to you whether you think that's more challenging or easier. Probably depends on where you've had the most challenge or the most benefit in the traditional program. It is a program that I think will become simple with a little bit of time. I am going to flip to the next pages. I've got this chart I showed at one time previously that summarizes what we just spoke about, just to put it into more of a visual aspect for you. How do we get members excited about working towards a DTM? How will it benefit them in their life or career is my first thought. Are resources like this available? Well, I think this is something that we've made some strides on. With the Competent Communicator, we had, to put it bluntly, horrible statistics with people actually working through and completing the program. And that was because it was 10 speeches before you received any recognition. And the only effective tool I ever had as a mentor myself was to actually, when a member signed up, sit down with them and say, when do you want to do your icebreaker and when were you going to do project 10? And then hold them accountable to that. But that, of course, was just one level, so to speak, in the traditional program. But how do you keep them moving forward? Pathways offers that in many ways, being much shorter strides to get to your next level completion. And we like recognition. I say the royal we, humans, we like being recognized for whatever we happen to do. So that's the first little thing built into Pathways. And one of the little benefits you get is the fact that people are motivated by that. Oh boy, I've done 4 speeches. I'm a level 1 now, etc. And you keep going up from there at a relatively rapid pace. So that alone is hugely encouraging. And then as people move through, okay, now you've finished your first path, for example. Hey, why don't you do that again with a different skill? And start to point out to them how close they are and get them to set goals for themselves. Then I think there is a lot of benefit there. And hopefully you get people moving along towards DTM. It's still not necessarily easy, and some of those things, for example, to motivate somebody to go out and start a club or mentor a club. Currently, that's something that is more people that are looking for a distinguished Toastmaster designation rather than truly looking to support, unfortunately. I found such great growth myself, and that's the other thing, actually was a theme at the convention a little bit, was the power of sharing stories. So that's something that perhaps we can work towards, is sharing our stories of success, what we've gained out of Toastmasters. For me, it's been a heck of a lot, and I hope everybody else on the line feels the same way, that you've gained a huge amount out of Toastmasters. All right, so that is the end of that portion. I was going to discuss a couple of resources. So again, there's District 4 has great Pathways resources on their website, breaks down some projects. I've sent out a few resources before, and I will send them out again. I have no problem sharing them a couple times just to make sure everybody's got them. That breaks down the projects. District 4's website is d4tm.org. And the Toastmasters.org website is also full of information. I think we often forget about it. We see, oh, well, that's just a cover page for Toastmasters.org. No, it's got a lot of other things on it. And if you go to resources on Toastmasters.org, then you go to, there's a couple of options really. There's logos, images, and templates, for example, where you can go in and you can get different logos, including the Pathways logo. And there is the resource library. What I like about the resource library is when you go to, once again, toastmasters.org/resources/resource library, resource-library, if you want to navigate to that site, you could search for whatever you want there. If you want something Pathways, for example, I'm going to search right now on my computer. It gives you templates, for example, for guest follow-ups, introducing them to Pathways. There's the icebreaker completion requests. There's paths and core competencies. There's navigating Pathways flyers. There's all kinds of things. There's a number of pages of resources there, just different documents. Some of them may be beneficial, some of them not so much, but those resources are there, and it's something that I love, the fact that you're able to go in and just search this library of different resources. And that can also be things related to, let's say you want to go for that Pathways DTM and you don't know much about Speechcraft. You could do a Speechcraft search there as well. Can't emphasize enough the importance of that section. One of my favorite sections of the website. There's also some excellent tutorials on the Pathways system. So you can go through and read tutorials on Basecamp Manager, just navigating Pathways, lots of different tutorials through the whole Pathways system. It's just a matter of, like I said, playing around with the system and getting used to it. And you'll find it pretty straightforward after that, and where to get the different resources from that site. And finally, I'd be remiss to let you know, YouTube, there should be a there was a number of Pathways videos. Our chief operating officer, Sally Noel Cohen, did, I want to say a year and a half, 2 years ago. Unfortunately, she left the organization. Her last day with Toastmasters was yesterday, but she's been an incredible resource for helping to develop the Pathway system, and her videos on YouTube were quite good overviews as well as of Pathways. So that is Pathways. I'll send you some more resources separately. I know I've been kind of going on about a number of different things, trying to get as much content and information out there as possible. And feel free to share the resources that I send you. Absolutely no concerns at all with letting the world know. I think it's really important that we're all in this together. We're all learning at the same time. I've taken some time to really dive deep into Pathways and try to get an understanding of it. But I certainly have some gaps as well, and I'm sure you're all feeling the same way. So the more we support each other in that growth and support people in our clubs, people in our areas potentially, and beyond, the more we're all going to be able to get onto this faster and easier. The last thing we want is to have guests coming to our meetings, seeing everybody working a different program, and we're trying to tell them how great Pathways is. We're going to have trouble getting our replacing any members that we lose if we do that. So the quicker we can all buy in, the better. And that's definitely easier said than done. Leslie's asking if anybody can contact me if you have specific questions in the future. Absolutely. I'm available. I'm not going to say 24/7 because that would probably be a slight lie, but I'm available anytime. If anybody wants to call me, email me, come down and visit me in my club, you're welcome to. I would be happy to answer Pathways or any other questions about Toastmasters. I absolutely love serving and helping people see the great things we've got here in Toastmasters is such an honor. So please reach out to me whenever you need anything. Of course, you also should have some good resources in hopefully your area and division directors or anyone else on the team. I'll speak for Sean. He's listening, and I'm sure he would be happy to help as well if anybody needs anything from him. That's what it's all about when we're serving at the district level. Is we're here to serve, right? So contact anytime. With that, I will put up my contact information here. I didn't put my phone number on that for some reason, but my email address is on the screen. If you shoot me an email, though, I'll give you my number as well if you prefer to chat by phone. Sometimes not as easy as I have a day job as well. My day job keeps getting in the way of Toastmasters. How awkward that is. But certainly, yes, reach out to me. Okay, everyone. Well, I hope you have a great evening, great day, wherever you happen to be. And we will certainly hopefully be hearing from you soon. And please feel free to tune in again next week. We've got more good things coming up, and we'll continue to try and make these as entertaining, as engaging as we can, while covering important topics to you and your club. Take care, everybody.